Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission for its regular meeting on Wednesday, October 11th. The time is 7 o'clock sharp. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Carmichael.
Present.
Commissioner Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here. Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Bartel.
Here.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Here.
And Chairman Pill.
Here.
We have a
Having a quorum, please join me and stand, and we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before you're seated, if you're going to give testimony tonight, either for or against, I need to have you sworn in. And if you would just respond with a simple "I do," raise your right hands. Do you swear that your testimony tonight will be the whole truth, so help you God? Thank you very much. And please silence all pagers and any electronic devices. It's a fairly small group tonight, but keep in mind that we are on television, so all speaking will be done up at the speaker's podium, and I believe everybody's already signed in, so I appreciate you doing that. Our first order of business tonight will be the approval of the minutes of the September 13th, 2017 regular meeting. May I have a motion, please?
so moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Van Buren, second by Commissioner Bartel. Any comment or discussion, changes to the minutes? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. The minutes are approved. We will now open up, if there's anyone here from the public who would like to speak on any item that is not on our agenda tonight. And I really don't see anybody here. I think you three gentlemen are all here for agenda items. So we will close the open forum. And we'll just have a quick review of the public hearing procedures. Tonight, I will introduce each item as it's indicated on the agenda. While I'm reading that, you could feel free to move up to the speakers area, either yourself or your team, and make sure that you are signed in. I'll then turn it over to you, and we invite the presenter or presenting team to go through their agenda items, explaining their items, addressing any findings of fact or hardships as relevant. There is an overhead projector for overhead use so that our folks at home can see what you're talking about. After that, I will then ask staff for comments. Once we've done that, we will open the public hearing. If anybody from the public is here and would like to speak on that, we'll allow them at that time, and we will allow everyone who is here to speak on that. We'll then close the public hearing, and then each commissioner will offer comments, ask questions of the applicant or of staff. There'll be a discussion among the commissioners. At the conclusion of that discussion, if a variance or special use is requested, we'll have a reading of the findings of fact by our staff. After that, we'll have a motion, second, and a roll call for each item that's listed under your agenda item. And then finally, I'll instruct the applicant as to what the next steps are. Any questions on tonight's hearing procedures? All righty, so our first order of business is old business, Planning and Zoning 17-020, the Village of Westmont regarding a zoning code text amendment for sign regulations as follows. A, amend Appendix A, Article 9 of the Westmont Zoning Code regarding amendments to the Village of Westmont sign code. Good evening, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so it's been a month since we've discussed this. I hope everyone's had ample opportunity to drive around and look at signs, notice the differences between our community, other communities, note the good, note the bad. I'm always open for suggestions, so if you have any suggestions here tonight, I'm always willing to listen. I figured I do not need to start from the beginning, so I will start at the end. So what's happened since last month? So basically, I'm going to only highlight three things. So basically, some of the issues that were brought up by the commission and some of the discussion topics, some of the items that were brought up in the public discussion, and some of the legal revisions which were necessary. If you remember, one of the primary reasons to continue this and bring it back was so that our attorney could look at some of the language, kind of refine it a little bit, and make it a little bit more in compliance with the legal restrictions that current standards demand, and then present it back to you. So in your packets is actually just changes from what we showed you last month to what we're proposing this month. I didn't want to overwhelm you with changes from the original text, which we had already covered. So the commission brought up some topics, so I just wanted to address them to show that staff did look into them. So it was brought up that addressing, should that be a requirement that's written into our code? So what we did is we went and figured out where it was written into the code. So it's actually written into the municipal code in section 70-160. It does require 6-inch numerals for commercial properties. Commercial also includes multifamily properties. Where is that addressed? And that is typically addressed with the annual business license and inspections from both the building division and the fire department. So I've discussed that with the building division in particular, and they did not feel it was necessary to add that as another layer into the sign code, that they would like it still regulated where it was to address it with the business license. So although we did look into it, there was no new language that is proposed, although we did add as an exemption into the exemptions that addressing is an exempt type of signage that is not subject to regulation, at least through the sign code. The other issue was lighting. So we had a lot of concerns with signs that could be too bright. So actually, if you look in the table of proposed section 11.10, which is actually, it was the old table 11.14, which is page 9 of the text. It actually does have requirements in the far right-hand columns for both a light reading at the lighting source and then at the sign. That's in addition to the general illumination standards that we have written into the code that basically says, particularly when it's a residential property, there should be no bright light going to that. I will tell you that we do not have a tool, staff does not have the tool to measure lumens or foot candles, but it is something that is enforceable. So if we do get a complaint that a sign does seem excessively bright, we do have enforceability to go out, get those tools necessary to see if it actually does meet the lighting standards. So it is enforceable under the current language. So once again, we did look into that, but because those standards are there, we did not open the chapter on is it too bright, is it too low, because we actually don't have the tools to go out and measure it at this point. So we don't have the methodology to go out and measure the signs that we think are too bright now and then say, well, what number reading is that? Is that high or low? So we're not opening that at this time with this text amendment as a discussion point or a change. We're just leaving that at the status quo. Some of the public discussion topics that came up was the issue of cabinet or box signs and the prohibition that we're putting in there. So we did go back and we did look at the comparable communities. It is prohibited in 2 of the 10 comparable communities. One of those communities, additionally, it doesn't restrict them, but it does give a bonus for individual letter signage. So the way they addressed it is they said, well, we'll let you have bigger signs if they're higher quality signs. I just wanted to kind of touch on the fact that individual letter signage is actually addressed in our commercial design guidelines as encouraged and preferred. So it is something that is in line with our comprehensive plan, our commercial design guidelines, our strategic plan. And I kind of did a little more analysis and I said, well, 2 out of 10 are actually 3 out of 10 when you consider the other one. Seems like we might be on the emerging trend on this one. So I said, well, what's different between us and those that aren't prohibiting it? And really the significant difference is for those communities that don't discriminate between a cabinet sign or an individual letter sign, the average sign size they're permitting is 1.28 square feet per lineal foot of frontage. We're proposing 2 square feet per lineal foot of frontage. So it's a lot bigger sign that we are permitting. So those that are permitting them are saying they need to be a lot smaller than what we're doing. So staff is still confident that this does fit with the guidelines that we want to see along our corridors, and particularly because it is a generous 2 square foot per lineal foot. Staff is confident that this is the text that we would like to see approved. The other topic was pole signs, and actually I don't think we discussed pole signs all that much here, but I did get some feedback from some of the public. So we also looked at that. It is prohibited in 5 of the 10 comparable communities, so it's a 50% rate that prohibits them. And of those communities that don't prohibit them, not only is their average height for signs a little bit lower than we permit. Well, we permit 16, it's 15.5 is the average, although several were at 12, some were at 5. They restrict sizes. So they say you can have tall signs, they can be pole signs, but some communities were saying you could only have 50 square feet or something small. We don't make any of those clarifications. We basically say you're permitted a certain size sign that's derived off of the size of your property or the size of your building. It can be up to 16 feet tall. What we're proposing is they cannot be pole signs, that the base needs to be at least 50% the width of the base, up to 8 feet, or 75% the width of the base, up to 16 feet. So we're not saying reduce height, we're just saying clad that pole with something that's more substantial. And then finally, the legal revisions. So I'm not going to touch on all of them because there are a lot of little nuances in language that we did tweak. But the primary ones are flags. We did have a whole section of flags in there. How to display it, when to display it, where to display it. That is actually a very heated topic in terms of debate, in terms of freedom of speech. After looking at other communities and consulting with our attorney, we are proposing removing it from the regulations in the code text and then listing it as an exemption. So basically, non-commercial flags would be exempt from the sign code. And then second, we're looking at some reorganization of that exempt clause, which is the actual last page in the sign code. For the most part, a lot of things stayed the same, but what we did is kind of a reorganization. So there are a few exempt signs that are regardless of zoning, in particular signs put up by the village or a governmental organization. There are non-commercial signs in commercial properties of a limit of 12 square feet. So that would not be that would not need a permit, that would not be considered a temporary sign and subject to the 60 days per year. That is basically just saying on a commercial property, as long as it's non-advertising, that could be, we're open, we're hiring, it could be political signs, during the election season. 12 square feet for the commercial properties, and then something similar for the residential properties, just much smaller, of 4 square feet. That gets us out of a lot of the legal loopholes and requirements. We were defining, in particular, political signs in a certain way. There are restrictions on how we can regulate that. We can regulate the size of those, but that's the only thing we can really regulate. Just wanted to touch, these are the meetings that we've gone through, so it's been a little bit more than a year. We did continue at the last meeting so that we could bring up some of these topics so you could see the proposed text as we think it will go to Village Board. And we are making that request tonight. And as always, I'm here for questions. So if you have any questions about the presentation last month, anything tonight, I'm always available to answer those.
Thank you, Joe. Jill, do you have comments on this or not really? John?
No.
I will then open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak on this subject? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we'll start with Commissioner Van Buren.
What you've given us today to look at for this meeting pretty much reflects my understanding of what we discussed earlier, in addition to the few changes that you've had since then. And I would just like to commend you on a thorough job, and I would feel that this is ready to go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas?
Again, your synopsis is right on and completely understandable, even to me. And since I don't see any businesses here screaming and yelling and lining up, again, good job.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I got.
Commissioner Sharp?
No further comments. I think you've done a great job with this, and like Commissioner Van Buren said, I think it covers what we talked about last month, and I'm excited to see it put into place.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartel?
My only question is regarding political signs. Is there some type of timeline when they're taken down? And is there any way to sort of manage that? Because they tend to stay up for a while.
I don't know that we said anything about the timeline, but I know Mr. Zemanak, that was one of the things that he did discover, that is, we cannot regulate periods of display. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The only thing we can regulate is the size, the overall size, but there's a state act specifically on the topic, because the legislature has wanted their signs up.
Of course,
Legislator wanted
they do.
their signs up all the times.
Okay. All right, I just thought I'd ask. I think it's a great job. Great job, Joe.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes, Joe, good job. I do have one question. If you go back to the box sign, the only question that I have is, it seems like if a corner property that has more frontage than something mid-block, they would be allowed a sign that's double the size, basically. Is there going to be a maximum put on that in that particular case, or are we going to exempt out corner properties from that lineal footage size requirement?
The way we're dealing with corner properties, it is changed from the original code. So basically, we would consider that you have two frontages, which most commercial properties that are on a corner demand a higher rate because you have exposure to two streets. The way our current code read, it said you're allowed one sign on the building, and you're allowed one additional sign as long as it's a ground sign. That doesn't seem appropriate for a corner lot. I would argue that you should have two signs, one on each side of the building, and then also a ground sign if you meet the requirements. The way that the code is proposed is it says it takes each of those facades individually. So you have one that faces one street, we look at the lineal frontage, you're allowed a certain square footage based on that. And then on the other side, you're also a frontage, and you're allowed an allowance on there. What I did write into the code is because typically a portion of that building ends up being service area. It's not architecturally significant, it's just kind of forgotten. The way I wrote it in the code is that second side that has that service area, we can only count the architecturally designed window space as the frontage. So they are permitted more signage because they are a corner lot. There is no maximum given there, just like there's no maximum that if you're an inline store, but you had a lot of frontage, that we would cap it. And could I introduce that into the code? Yes, but it would, I would say, be prohibitive and somewhat controversial just because we've never had a cap. So there is not a cap that I'm proposing there. And that's one of the reasons why we're confident with the individual letter signage and allowing those and restricting the new cabinet or box signs. A cabinet or box sign, basically the entire, it's usually a rectangular shape, is the sign. It's illuminated, it's got writing on it. When you do an individual letter sign, there's a lot of what you call dead space. So when you draw a box around individual letters, there's a lot of area that's not illuminated. So there is somewhat of a penalty because you count it in their square footage, but there is no signage there is no light emitting from there. And so that's why we like the 2 square feet, but limiting the cabinet signs. It's giving a higher quality sign. It's not making them constrict their signs to something much smaller. But we did want to relax the rules for corner lots in general. A lot of the corner lots we have existing variances to get more and more signage. They tend to approach us and say, your current code doesn't give us enough, so we need more. So this is kind of trying to accommodate what we want with a little bit of what is typically requested.
Got it. Good job.
Thank you. Commissioner Carmichael?
Yeah, of course. It's been a long road for you here and lots of presentations, and I think you're finally coming to the end of an excellent product here, Joe. I have a single question for you on our exemption or our prohibition for pole signs. Existing pole signs are exempted. Is that exemption in perpetuity? Is it, or is there a cutoff date?
It would follow the new non-conforming language that we're actually writing into the code. And basically it says that the owner has 1 year of it not in use, and then it would lose its non-conforming status. So that could stay there. The business that's there could go out of business, the property could be vacant for 1 year, and we would allow a new tenant to come in and reuse it, put a new face in it. It's when you try to modify its structure or change it or move it, then we'd say you lose your nonconformity. So an existing business that's not going anywhere that has a pole sign can have it in perpetuity. There's nothing that says we would ever come after them to say you have to modify your sign.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
And I also have no further questions. I appreciate all the hard work that you and the rest of the staff have done researching this, and especially meeting with the community after all those meetings, and I've been to many of them myself. I've seen a great job and a willingness to use some of the things that have been brought up and to work with a lot of the comments that our community members have made. So kudos for that. Any further discussion by the commission or any comments or questions? All righty, we do not have a findings of fact needed for this. So I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning item 17-020, the Village of Westmont regarding a zoning code text amendment for sign regulations as follows. A, amend Appendix A, Article 11 of the Westmont zoning code regarding amendments to the Village of Westmont sign code.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Thomas. Comments or questions or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes?
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. Joe, you have our approval unanimously, and I will have Jill contact you when you'll be going before the village board for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our old business. We now move on to new business, and we'll begin with planning and zoning item 17-021. Magnet Schultz of America regarding the property located at 401 Plaza Drive in Westmont for the following. A site and landscaping plan approval to allow for a permeable paver patio and temporary parking pad in the M Manufacturing District. Gentlemen? The microphone is yours.
Hi, my name is Greg Raskushka. I'm the CEO and president of Magnet Schultz, and we appreciate the time you guys are giving us, and we hope we can present something that you can approve.
Tom Gates, purchasing manager at Magnet Schultz. We're just asking for a landscaping approval for just a 30 by 100 turf stone patio for employee lunches and breaks and a little bit of maybe vehicle stacking when we need it. So, any questions?
Do you have one of the drawings with you? Perhaps you could just put it underneath the overhead, and if you just put it down, they'll turn it on. Joe, I'll give you a hand there with it. And so if you could just explain now directionally what we're looking at with that photo, please. You could see it up on the screen now, and that's,
Oh.
yeah, you'll need to stay there, but I just want to give you an idea of what everybody's looking at. Yep.
Yeah, if you see the white roof there is our building, so then that's all grass area there, and the 100 by 30 foot is where we put the patio.
Great. Okay. Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
All right, I will go to staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what's before you is a site and landscaping approval request. So anything in a commercial property, which even though this is M District is considered a commercial property, requires us to do a site and landscaping approval. On some of the larger projects, it's pretty evident what we're reviewing. We're reviewing landscaping, parking, a lot of different elements. In this case, what's being proposed is a permeable paver patio. And we're using the definition of patio, and if you noticed, I put into parentheses temporary parking pad. So the primary use is to serve the staff. I think you have a little over 100 staff.
Yes.
That runs 2 shifts. So right now, if you went and visited the site, you'd see that there's some picnic tables kind of dispersed out through the grass. So they're centralizing a place for staff. But they also do have a need in that they have a few fleet cars that they use for interns from out of the country, out of the state, out of town. So they have a few cars that are just sitting in the parking lot that they'd like on occasion to move over to that pad to free up some space in the parking lot. When I was there, the parking lot was fairly full. I don't know what it was like when you were there, but during the day, it tends to be fairly full. As it is a permeable paver patio, the engineers have looked at it and said it meets all the thresholds of, it doesn't invoke any additional stormwater requirements that are needed. And then it's small enough at 3,000 square feet that it actually doesn't invoke any requirements for additional landscaping. I think the actual cutoff is 5,000 square feet. So if they were proposing 5,000 square feet of patio, then I'd be telling them, well, what kind of landscaping will you be adding? We'll look at the entire site. It does not hit that threshold. So in this case, it is just a simple 3,000 square foot pad that is multi-use. And as always, I'm available for any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Joe. We will go to the public for comment now, and is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this? I didn't think so. All right, seeing no one, I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we'll begin with commissioners, beginning with Commissioner Thomas.
Initially, as far as I was concerned, when I went out there and looked, I guess you guys had just sealed the driveway or
Yeah, we just seal coated, yes.
Saturday or whatever it was when we went out there. Okay, so during the day, you want to park cars on there during overnight-ish kind of thing, right?
Yeah, we have, we'll call them fleet vehicles, both vans and some cars. And right now, at the end of the second shift, we'll park them in the bays or the docks, but we still have stuff that sits out in the regular area. We'd like to be able to put them over there.
Get them out of the way, and then when they're not there, you have place for lunch for the...
Yeah, the area back there gets a little swampy occasionally, so to have a nice patio-type area would be a lot better for the folks. And it's not exactly very flat if you've been out there.
Right.
This will be a nice, level, pitched, so...
And the permeable...
permeable, it kind of makes it look a little better.
Right. That's all I have.
Commissioner Sharp?
I don't have further questions. I think it's a great idea to provide that amenity to your employees, and if it solves some of your parking crunch, that's even better. I think while it's not required, it is always a good idea to have some landscaping or potted plants or something just to create more of a sense of space, just something to throw out there. But I am supportive and wish you the luck. Wish you all the best.
Commissioner Bartel?
I'm also very supportive. I guess my only question is, why so far out? Is it because you'd have some parking of vehicles there and you didn't want them close to the building? Is that it?
To keep it, we wanted to, and that actual area there is probably the least, it's kind of
Quiet.
dead zone.
Okay.
So it gives us a little bit of use of something that really isn't useful right now.
Okay, great. No, I'm supportive.
Great. Commissioner Lavoy?
I have a couple questions. One is your hours of operation.
We're getting close to 24 hours a day. We have 2 shifts that are split by 2 hours in between. So the first shift we open, there's a guy there at about 4:30 that opens the building, and second shift can finish up somewhere around 2 o'clock, so.
And so,
That's 2 a.m.
yeah, so the patio could be used at night if it were, what I'm after is the lighting of the patio. Would it be necessary to support staff during hours overnight?
The parking in the off shifts is good. The worst scenario that we have is the between shifts, because you have the office people that'll work, they extend on as second shift is coming there. At some point, sometimes you have 2 sets of shift people at the same time. So to have some of the vehicles that aren't in perpetual use off to the side is a good thing. But we don't anticipate it being, if you come in and say you start on the second shift, you're not going to park there. You're parking a lot closer to the building.
But the patio for your break time could be used, right?
They don't pretty much go out there at night. It's the day shift people do it. We've got about maybe 25 people on the second shift, and they have staggered lunch hours, so we don't, or that would be a dinner hour.
Okay.
They don't really go outside at night. I think it's more the bugs than anything.
Yeah, okay. Joe, it's not required per ordinance, is it?
No, there is no requirement for lighting.
Okay. Nothing further for me.
Commissioner Carmichael.
I have no objection to your, it's good use of the property. It just seems to me that your primary purpose sounds like it's going to be for parking, but you're proposing that the primary purpose is for employee use. And if it were employee use, like Commissioner Bartel's question, why wouldn't you put it up next to the building instead of the back of the property?
Right next to the building there, it's kind of a drop off, and it literally is it gets soggy. And in terms of putting something there, there's a couple months a year where that center of that area there is, you will sink your shoes into it. On the flip side of it, that's a little bit higher, so it's a better spot to put it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Van Buren.
When I was there, it was also empty, so it was the weekend, so I didn't see it when it was full. But no, I have no problem with it. Basically, regardless of either use, for using it for the employees' lunch and so on, or for a lot, it's fine with me.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of points for clarification. So in looking at the drawing, that treed area to the south of the white rectangle, I assume that's your property, probably to the end of the striped lot. And
Right.
that's sort of a detention area in there also.
Right, it goes, this down here is actually a dish down.
It's a retention pond.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was there also looking at that, and so that probably takes a lot of the runoff. Once it fills in the grass area, then it probably heads that way
it heads
afterwards.
that way, and we look to pitch it properly so that we use that a little bit better than it probably currently is.
Will you have to do anything with this special in the winter? So when there's snow, I'm not sure where you store your snow now. Do you just plow it onto the grassy area? And
Yes.
then will you have to plow this? And does that run into a problem with plows damaging it or digging it up or anything?
According to the contractor, it should be good for that, and that will really depend in terms of, this might be actually better than this current one right here, because this is nice and open out this direction. Here you've got some trees and stuff like that. It gets a little dicey pushing all of the stuff down. On the flip side of it, one of the challenges we have in the wintertime, we're always requesting to shovel away, because when we come out, there are some giant hills that get put, because there's not enough street area to put the snow. So we might actually be able to put more of it out in that back area now, because we can push it over that direction.
Gotcha. And then finally, I noticed that you've got a couple of temporary storage units back there. Are there plans to keep those? Are those temporary in nature, or what is there expansion in the works, or?
We have global operations. We get stuff in from time to time, and then we also have things that, pieces of equipment that may be retired or coming out. So moving back and forth with those, we're probably going to want to have something like that available going forward into the future. So.
Okay. All right, yeah, I think that, I'm not sure what the logistics are and whether those are allowed in that particular district, but that's sort of beyond my area. But it was something that I noticed, because I haven't seen that anywhere else in that area then. Okay, great, I have no further questions. Does anyone else have anything else? All righty. So, Planning and Zoning Item 17-021, Magnet Schultz of America regarding the property at 401 Plaza Drive in Westmont for A, a site and landscaping plan approval to allow for a permeable paver patio and a temporary parking pad in the M Manufacturing District. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Sharp. Any comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Pill.
Yes. So you have our recommendation. It's a recommendation, and Joe or Jill will contact you and let you know when you will go for final disposition before the village board. That's almost always on a Thursday night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
presentation, and good luck to you guys.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, Planning and Zoning, item 17-022, use store at Westmont LLC regarding the property located at 701 Blackhawk Drive in Westmont for the following. A special use permit request to operate a cartage and express establishment, U-Haul vehicle rentals, as an accessory use in the M Manufacturing District. Good evening.
Thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here and listen to our request. My name's John Lee, and I'm with U-Store at Westmont LLC. It's a self-storage facility located at 701 Blackhawk Drive, and we're requesting to allow U-Haul rentals as a special use permit, which would be accessory to our self-storage facility. We believe it's going to be a commodity that helps residents within our community, and it goes hand in hand with self-storage, and we're providing an extra service to the residents of Westmont.
All righty. All right, I will go to staff. If you'd like to make some comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what's before you is a request for 701 Blackhawk. It's the former Julian Electric. The applicant actually, they purchased both this building and the building on Plaza, which I think is 400 Plaza. But this request in particular is just for this building. So what is before you is a special use request for, the closest classification we have to this in our zoning code is cartage. And it would be considered it's a special use, and it needs, basically, they have to show that there's no traffic congestion that is generated from it. So they have proposed that 9 spaces in the back corner of the property be designated as spaces for these trucks that they will be renting. There is a large parking lot. There is a little discrepancy on the number of spaces that were there when I was out there, and they've recently repaved it and restriped it because this is part of their renovation as they move into this building. When this was Julian Electric, they did need all, I'm going to use 52 spaces because that's what I had. They did need all 52 spaces for employees. The use that is there now is the parking requirements are only derived by the number of employees that they need to have on site at any one time, and I think it's 1 per 2 employees. So unless they intend on having 84 employees or 80-some employees at any given time, which I don't think that is their business plan, many of these spaces outside of the building will technically sit unused because the M Manufacturing District, as all our districts, don't allow outdoor storage. So what they can't do is lease the space to, pods or anything on the outside of the building. I think the one highlight that staff wanted to point out is that because this is a special use, they are designating specific spaces. There is always, I'm going to call it the opportunity or disadvantage that there is a lack of enforcement power in terms of on day-to-day operations if they end up having more trucks, that it could spill out much further out into the parking lot. This is viewable from Ty Warner Park, so this is viewable from our Premier Park in the village. So there is concern, and the special use does not actually require any kind of screening. So there's no requirement that I can force on the applicant to plant trees or anything. And actually, there is no space between this parking lot and the sidewalk for there is no green space for any landscape. They would actually have to modify the parking lot to add any kind of screening. And as always, I'm available for any questions.
Great. So we have no one here in the public at this point, so I will just go ahead and officially close the public hearing and we will begin with Commissioner Sharp.
Good evening. I don't have many questions. What is your anticipated truck length that you're planning on storing? Because it seems the radius is very tight to pull in and out for large trucks.
The average truck length, they're usually the cargo vans. They run about a little over 10 to 12 feet, but they range from the cargo van U-Hauls to a 10-footer or a 15-footer, but each spot is going to fit within a parking space that we have.
Yeah. So you're not getting the 20-foot or 50-foot
I think
trucks?
there might be a 15-foot box truck, but again, that runs like 15 feet long, and they'll be able to fit in the 10 by 20 spaces.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Bartel?
It says scheduling can trigger more vehicles and reservations than anticipated. How many are we talking about? Because these trucks are going to be right across from the park.
We're only going to have them designated within those 9 parking spots. There's only going to be 9 U-Hauls available at our site, each within those spots. They'll be available for tenants to rent out, and the average time that a tenant usually takes out a rental is for a few hours. So the most that we would usually have is around 9, maybe 12. Somebody drops off a truck halfway throughout the day, and somebody rents it out at the midpoint and then drops it off before close of operations. So we really don't anticipate more than 12 truck rentals a day.
So those same 9 trucks could be rented more than once, some
Yeah.
of those.
Yes, but typically tenants just use them. They take them out first thing in the morning and they'll drop them off at the end of day.
Okay. I'm just thinking in terms of the traffic issue with the park right there. That's the reason for the question. Yeah, that was my only question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes, I have a few questions. Is this rental going to be for local use only, or are there going to be U-Hauls coming in from other locations to drop off or pick up?
It's going to be local only, so we're going to have the U-Hauls. We're going to get 9 assigned to our site if approved. We'll have only 9 trucks available at our site, and those 9 trucks are the only ones that are going to be coming in and out.
Okay. Is there any maintenance of those trucks happening at this site?
I don't believe so. I believe a U-Haul representative will take those trucks to their location for any maintenance items that need to be addressed.
Okay. And I also have a concern about the turning motions. I looked up on the U-Haul site, and there are actually bigger trucks than what you're specifying. There's a 24-foot truck on the U-Haul website, and looking at that, the turning motions will not work on this site plan unless you take up more spaces or park sideways. But I'm also concerned about the alley appears to be a joint ingress-egress drive aisle on the east side of the building. And it's also directional flow. It looks like the entrance, off of Blackhawk is one way in. So I'm concerned about the way the truck motions are going to happen, because I don't think you can back a 24-foot truck into a 20-foot space.
With U-Hauls, we won't have anything larger than a 15-foot box truck in there. I actually have a site plan here. If it's okay if I put it on this.
Yeah, let's see.
But then here, there's a driveway that goes through the parking lot on Plaza Drive into these spaces, so they can just pull directly into here, and it runs in and out of the facility this way.
Okay, but still, the spaces that are drawn on the site plan that you're showing, the space is 20 foot deep and there's 24-foot trucks, and the turning motion won't permit that to happen.
We won't have any 24-foot trucks. The largest truck size will be 15 feet.
And Commissioner, what I'm going to propose for the ordinance is that the special use approval, since we can't impose special conditions on a special use approval, limit the trucks to no more than 9. Limit the size, greatest size to a 15-foot box truck, so 24s aren't allowed, and limit these trucks for local use and thereby prohibiting drop-offs from, let's say, someone from Nebraska was coming to Westmont, moving in, unloaded, wanted to drop the truck off somewhere. That could not occur at this location.
Could you add one more criteria to that, and that would be that the common egress easement on the east side of the building be open and not be blocked off with trucks, because, you know, if we get them in, if they park there, or if they get more, they need to keep that drive aisle open because they can't go out any other way.
I think that's code anyhow, to keep a drive aisle open, but we certainly can add it just as a point of emphasis.
Great. I have no other questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carmichael?
So there will be no parking on the east side of the building in that alley through there? Is that-
That's correct. There's 9 parking spots here indicated in the green highlighting, and those will be the only spaces that U-Hauls will be parked in.
So there are 3 parking spaces into the building, right on the north side of the building, and then 6 spots on the north side of the parking lot that you've identified.
Correct.
The way you have those painted there, I mean, those are car
The U-Haul-
size. Can you park a 15 by 20 truck, 6 of them side by side, and those,
We have at our other facilities, we just
Yeah.
fit they're 15-foot trucks, so they're just a little bit bigger than the average size car, but they're able to fit in these parking spots. I believe they run approximately 10 by 20 feet, so if they're 15 feet in length, they can fit within them.
and I'm not clear, does your company also control the parking lot that's on the north side of the 400 Plaza building, the larger parking lot?
Yes.
Back there where the Teslas are parked? Do you have an agreement with Tesla for,
I believe so.
is it possible that you could use any overflow that you would have with these U-Hauls in that lot?
No. We're
It's
only
not-
requesting for this site, they would only be at 701
Why?
because it's closest to our leasing office. Our self-storage facility is located at this corner of 701 Blackhawk Drive, so we want tenants to not have to walk as far to be able to use those trucks. So it's a convenience factor for our tenants to not have to go there, and all lease agreements or all rentals would be done through our front office, so we would have our own staff there renting out these trucks.
And you don't anticipate having any employees that would be moving vehicles, parking, unparking, and delivering, moving a vehicle if someone stopped at the front of the building to drop a vehicle off, you would have them
We would have
pull
our
it to
employees
these,
reallocate them to
to
this
these spots.
designated spot. Correct.
I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Van Buren?
The storage that you have there is individual storing spots for someone from the outside to use to store?
All the self-storage is located within the inside of the building, and they're
I
individual.
understand that, but how did they get it there and get it out of there?
They usually, a tenant will pull up to the site, park their items, or bring it into the loading bay, and then move their items into a locker and then move out. The loading bays would be large enough to accommodate any U-Hauls that are brought into the site.
Okay. What's the relationship between the U-Haul truck and the bins, the storage areas that you have there?
Most tenants, when they move into an item, they require a larger unit size than what can fit into the average car in amounts of square footage. So if a tenant would have to make multiple trips in order to fill up a 10 by 30 unit, that's a 300 square foot unit. So by having a moving truck, it makes them reduce the number of trips that they would have to take into our facility because they could load all their items into one truck. So it's our goal to provide a service that helps the community and reduces the number of traffic counts that would be coming into our site.
Okay, so the use of the trucks is strictly related to the use of the storage area that you have. Is that right? If I came up there and I want to rent a truck for a day, having nothing, not storing there?
You would be able to rent a truck because the biggest users of these moving trucks are to move items from one place to another. So if you were moving to like a new house or new apartment, you would be able to rent one of our trucks, take it to off-site, and then use it to deliver goods.
Okay. But basically you're dealing locally?
Yes.
You don't do any long-distance rentals?
No, we're not doing any drop-offs. It's our trucks are staying at our site, and they're,
It'll always be the same trucks recycling?
correct, they're being brought back to our site.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I have.
Well, an effective group. Most of my questions, I had questions on sizes. I was very concerned about the turning radius, particularly in the 3-pack. Those are really tight there and much shorter than the ones across with your new restriping.
If it's okay, we could also reallocate, if the turning radius is concerned, we can offset the 3 spaces to a different portion of this parking lot, but keep it within the northeast portion of our lot, so it's furthest away from you.
Because one of my concerns was somebody coming through the alley and then having to make the turn. If you've got a truck in that, looking at the drawing, the most right-hand spot, I guess that would be the northeast corner of those 3. That's a pretty tight little turn there. I had my car back there and was checking it out, and it's quite tight.
These parking spaces, we can change the allocated spots, so if it satisfies the conditions, we can place it all along the northern portion of this parking lot.
I'll let our staff make those recommendations, but just a point. I know you're here for 701, but just out of curiosity, do you anticipate this Tesla agreement getting bigger? Will there be more cars stored back there with them? Or there was quite a few. I was surprised how many were back there.
I don't believe so, because at a future point in time, that will be turned into a self-storage facility as well.
You'll be looking to build and extend that other building back in there?
Correct.
So the use, the tenants only, so I would assume that this will get on U-Haul's website as a location.
That is correct. Customers will be able to come to our website and call to reserve a truck, but most of the reservations will be done through U-Haul's reservation portal online.
Okay, because almost every time I've seen one of these rental things, they've run amok. They end up with 30 trucks there in no time. And there's all different sizes, there's maintenance going on, there's trailers, there's hitches, there's all kinds of stuff. But you're saying none of that's gonna be here, and you're writing that into the approval?
I am.
Okay, and you understand that?
I understand.
Great. And you'd already answered this one, but once again, there's no cross-country dropping off going on here of large trucks, somebody coming in from California, moving to this area, and then needs to get rid of the truck at the end of the day? And finally, then, when do you anticipate the facility actually opening, or is it already open?
The facility's already open. The one on 701 is already opened. We received all the necessary permits, and
Congratulations.
thank
Good.
you. And we're very excited to be here.
You might also want to think about a membership in the local chamber, very good at promoting new businesses and things like that also. And that's the last question I have. I apologize, I missed Commissioner Thomas. Yep, sorry.
I only have one question. Somebody rents space for storage and shows up there to drop off their stuff with, what's the biggest truck they can show up with of their own to your facility to drop off stuff from their house or whatever?
I don't have the current specifications of our loading bay, but as large as the loading bay is, they'd be able to look back into that. We have 2 loading bays on site that they'd be able to pull up into. It'd be screened away from all view. There's sliding glass doors. They close off the area, but whatever the size is for that one.
So you need to make anybody who rents from you space to know what they're allowed to show up with,
Correct.
size-wise. Yeah. Other than that, you have your fleet, and that's it, and you don't have to worry about 20s. You only have 15s, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
Welcome. Good luck.
Thank you.
All righty, any other comments or questions by commissioners? Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes, I have one other question for staff. Did fire look at this?
Buyer did not look at this, no.
So effectively, what we have is we have a dead-end area where these trucks are going to be parked if fire needs to get there, and they need to back out.
Formally, yes, and as the applicant has shown, they're indicating that they can fit in the spaces just like the previous parking scenario. And that's why it wasn't routed to fire. And I would, after sitting here and having come from code enforcement, I would ask the question, and I think this is directed towards John, that when the special use is written, could it potentially, rather than designating these 9 spaces, be a little bit more flexible in something like no more than 9 trucks, but no trucks could be parked past the midpoint of the building in the westerly direction, and then give them a little flexibility in how to kind of maneuver them? And if it does end up that it is a turning radius thing that is consistently bad, then they have the option, as long as the trucks are a little bit movable and less designated to these 9 spaces. I'm just asking that as a question, as a potential, way to write the actual special use.
Yeah, I mean, legally, we can require them to park wherever is reasonable, especially if it's a fire safety issue. So I guess that's a question for you.
We'd be okay with accommodating that request and designated within those aisles in order to provide a large enough turning radius. So that's something that we're okay with.
Okay, so maybe we can work on, the first, or the westernmost 10 spots or whatever, 15 spots will not be utilized for parking of U-Hauls.
Right. I think it's important to work on the language, because for our code enforcement staff, while I understand it'll be in the ordinance, it is difficult for us to have the manpower to go out there and enforce how long the trucks are, which plates are on them, whether they're out of state or not. So we just want to make sure that we can adequately respond to the ordinance requirements.
Okay.
So I want to continue my question here. So we know that based on the U-Haul, even though what you're saying is that the size of the trucks can vary, but the U-Haul website does have 24-foot trucks, and those 24-foot trucks, we know that the turning radiuses are not adequate based on this plan. So I agree with Joe that some language is going to have to be added to make sure that that gets accommodated. And if these trucks do stick out, that restricts fire from getting to the north side of the building. I don't think that they can get to the east side of the building either, with far enough distance away from the building. And because it's a life safety issue, I don't think, I'm not going to be in favor of this request. It's a life safety matter. I just feel pretty strongly about that. Fire needs to get there, they need to get out. And if trucks are longer than what's shown on this plan, it really restricts their abilities, especially for a tower reach from that corner to this building or somewhere else in that alley. So, I think language needs to be addressed.
So
We have a maximum length in there.
Yeah, we talked about that already.
Yeah,
The ordinance is going to restrict it to no more than 15 feet, and we're going to push the vehicles to what I think is the east, at least as shown on
Additional
there.
language has to be added to be pushed away from that.
We mentioned that, so I think that allows for fire trucks to get in and out, and
Yeah, and to that specific point about the 24-foot U-Hauls, we can specifically request with U-Haul that none of those will be allowed at our site, so they won't even give us that truck, again, to accommodate that request.
so on the U-Haul website or whatever, that won't be a box that can be checked.
That won't be an option at our site, so they provide you with a select stock of inventory, and we can specify that will not be, there will be no 24-foot trucks at our site available.
And I know you addressed there would be no maintenance done. It was going to be done at his off-site. I assume there'll be no fueling done either there. You'll just go up to a gas station when you need gas or something like that. Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments? All right. We have a special use in this case, so we will require a reading of the findings of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What's before you is PZ 17-022, use store at Westmont LLC regarding 701 Blackhawk Drive in Westmont. Request for a special use to allow cartage and express establishment, U-Haul vehicle rentals, as an accessory use in the M Manufacturing District. Criteria number 1, that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. Findings of fact, the proposed storage and leasing of vehicles will occur in a screened parking area in the manufacturing district and will not adversely impact the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. Traffic impacts to the area should be minimal, and the use is consistent with the surrounding business and manufacturing uses. The existing facility will conform to all applicable building, fire, and zoning codes. Criteria number 2, that the special use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair property values within the neighborhood. Findings of fact, the proposed storage and leasing of vehicles will occur in a screened area and will not generate adverse noise, light, odor, or traffic. The business will maintain regular business hours and should not adversely affect surrounding properties or adversely impair property values. Criteria number 3, that the establishment of the special use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. Findings of fact, surrounding properties are fully developed, and this proposed use at this location will not impede future redevelopment of surrounding properties. Criteria number 4, that adequate utilities, accessways, drainage, and/or other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. Findings of fact, the property is currently served by adequate utilities, accessways, and other necessary facilities, and no new utilities or drainage are required as a result of this proposed use. Criteria number 5, that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion in the public streets. Findings of fact, the proposed use should generate minimal additional traffic and may actually reduce traffic to the primary storage use on the property. The property contains sufficient means of ingress and egress. Vehicles will be located in a designated area in the parking lot. Criteria number 6, that the special use shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located, except as such regulations may in each instance be modified by the village board pursuant to the recommendation of the Plan Commission. Findings of fact, the proposed use conforms to all other regulations of the M District and no variances or other approvals are needed in conjunction with the special use request. Criteria number 7, the proposed use meets the special conditions of Special Condition 2. Findings of fact, the proposed use should not cause appreciable traffic congestion or related hazards. The property has adequate means of ingress and egress and is expected to generate minimal additional traffic on the roadways from current conditions. The public roadway is improved with sidewalks, which will assist with pedestrian safety. Vehicles will be parked in striped parking stalls and fire lanes will be maintained.
If you agree with these findings of fact, please raise your hand. If you do not agree, please raise your hand. Findings of fact are approved by a vote of 6 to 1. I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning, item 17-022, use storage Westmont LLC regarding the property located at 701 Blackhawk Drive in Westmont for a special use permit request to operate a cartage and express establishment, U-Haul vehicle rentals, as an accessory use in the M manufacturing district.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Thomas. Is there any discussion on the motion?
The stipulations that were made will be added to this motion?
They will be part of the ordinance
Part of the
that's sent
ordinance.
to the village board,
Okay.
and they'll be reflected in the minutes.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bartel,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy,
No.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Pill,
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas,
Yes.
and that's it. Okay.
All right. You have our recommendation, John, and Joe or Jill will get hold of you and let you know when you're scheduled to appear before the village board, and they will have the final authority to grant approval.
Great, thank you for your
Best of
time.
luck. Welcome to Westmont.
Thank you.
All righty. Do we have anything miscellaneous or any?
I have a few updates for the commission.
Please.
So most of your items from the the September meeting were approved last week at the village board meeting. The Linden square foot lot size variance, the cryotherapy and float tank spa, and the revised site plan for BMW all went through. We also did a revised beekeeping ordinance, if any of you are looking to have bees on your property.
But Black Hawk did not go through yet, right?
Well, no, that was going to be my next update. Tomorrow night, 505 Black Hawk, the lot width variance and the subdivision plat will go before the village board, as well as a facade grant request for Dolce's new awning.
Has that been changed, the
request?
505?
No, they were waiting, they did a FOIA request
Oh.
for additional information, so once that was ready, then they decided to go on this meeting.
Gotcha.
Let's see, tomorrow night, we also have the last meeting of the year for our Community Development Committee. That's at 4:30, and you're all welcome to attend. We'll be going over code enforcement updates, beautification and gateway signs, text amendments, and our permit updates. And as you all mentioned earlier, big thank you to Joe for completing the public hearing portion of the sign code process, and we're very excited to go before the village board.
I believe our next meeting is on November 8th. And
It's a little one?
at this point, we're scheduled for one meeting in November.
Correct.
Okay.
So November 8th, we have two cases. One is a lot width variance. The other is the much anticipated reapplication for the Harp Group at the Hilton and the changes to that project. So I anticipate that will be not a little meeting. It will be a lengthy meeting, but it is not we are not anticipating any additional meetings needing to be added in November.
Okay?
Is there any update on the residential project? on
One North Cass?
Yeah.
They would like to submit for the December meeting.
Commissioner Thomas?
Good.
Yeah, that's it.
And the only thing I would like to bring up to anybody who's got kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, on Saturday, October 21st, we have the Trick or Treat Trail downtown Westmont. It'll run from 11 to 1. So there's candy at all the local businesses. Last year, they had close to 800 kids came out. So it's a pretty big turnout. They'll have crossing yards at all the streets. It's very safe. There's a caskets on casket race. There's a pumpkin smashing contest. There's a lot of things, but the big thing and the bottom line is the kids get lots of candy. So,
We also have the trophy from the Caskets on Cass race from last year, available for viewing at our department.
yes, the champions.
Yes, community
Planning
development.
and Zoning Commission is not going to have an entry, a
Right.
casket entry in a team. I thought perhaps you would.
I thought you were
be heading that up.
coordinating that.
Community development
Sounds
and
like we
public
won't
works
win
will be
this year
teaming
either.
up again. We're very competitive.
Let the minutes reflect Commissioner Carmichael will be chairing our casket committee. All right, anything else? Great, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor?
Aye.
Our meeting stands adjourned. Thank you all.
Jill?
Yes?
Jimmy's